those who are sons and daughters of members of the USS San Francisco, because as Johnny says, we are now emerging as, you know, the adults, and it's about time. My dad was a very, very close friend of Dan Callahan's, Admiral Callahan. They became friends because they both worked for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Callahan was his naval aide as a Navy captain. My dad was the president's communications naval aide whenever he went on a ship, Navy ship, and he did that a lot, as you all know. So that's how Admiral Callahan and my dad became buddies, although they were probably 15 years apart. And during the war at Pearl Harbor, of course, they were both there. My dad was commanding the USS Zane, a destroyer, and they knew each other at Pearl Harbor. After Pearl Harbor, and I was actually at Pearl Harbor 2 days before the 7th. My dad put us on a ship to go back to the States, and on the 7th, the Japs hit, and on the 9th, he was going to come back with the Zane. He did not. But he brought the ship back about 2 months later, and he brought it right here to Mare Island. He then became, he left his ship, and Admiral Gormley asked him to go with him as Admiral Gormley set up the Southwest Pacific Command. Admiral Callahan was then a captain, went as Admiral Gormley's chief of staff, and they went to started in New Zealand. They ended up in New Caledonia, and they got there probably in April of 1942, May. Admiral Gormley was not as aggressive as perhaps some would have liked him to be. and he was fired, actually relieved, and sent to Hawaii, where he had a command. But in his place was Admiral Halsey. Halsey now was a terrific combat leader, and he said to Admiral Callahan, who was then promoted, go on up and get in that battle and take command of this task force. So Admiral Callahan said, okay, and LeHardy, I want you to go with me. So he did. So they both joined the USS San Francisco. I would guess about I'm guessing about October of 1942, just about a month before this major battle. That ended, of course, in both of them losing their lives, and as you all described, that one shell hit the bridge and killed probably 8 or 9 people. I did meet one of the survivors who came to Coronado, where we were living. Right. And got a lot of the details from him. But my dad, I don't want to go too long here. Johnny said only 30 minutes, right? I did want to introduce my dad's 2 of his great-grandchildren. Would you 2 stand up, please? Sarah and James Kellogg. I would also like to introduce my wife, Judy, and Sarah's friend, Jay. Would you stand? Jay Martinez. Thank you all for that. And I am really honored. I've got 2 of my, maybe 3 of my classmates. I went to West Point. I didn't go to the Naval Academy. It's all right. But would you 2 please stand? Fred Fogg and George Young. It was great to have you. And Johnny, just one more thing here. This is really important. My dad was really a great father. He had a young son who had actually, with my dad, had gone around the world on Navy ships, as my dad served in Panama, the Philippines, and China. They had another child, my sister, whose name is Linda, and Linda's relatives are here, Linda Sweet, and Jay and Susan Sweet. Would you please stand? They are here. Thank you. But this little boy went around the world at age 4. He then died, was killed in an accident in Annapolis, and my dad and my mother then had me a year later. Now, just to sum it up, and then I'm going to sit down, because you mentioned all the action that my dad was in on the carrier and all the Medal of Honors, and I was especially impressed with the fact that 2 admirals were killed, the only 2 in the history of the United States Navy, only 2 admirals killed by direct naval gunfire, and they were classmates at the Naval Academy, class of 11, Scott and Callahan. I'm just going to end it here by telling you, as a way to honor you all, and as a way to kind of close the circle with my dad, who was killed and buried at sea, as all those were, on the way back to Espiritu Santo. Am I right about that? As a way to honor them, I researched the log. The log of the ship is at the Navy yard in Washington, D.C., and I read it in detail. And then, after I retired from the Army, 32 years in the Army, Judy and I took a sailboat, 39-foot sailboat, to Guadalcanal as we went around the world. And at the moment that they were killed, about 2 o'clock in the morning of the 13th of November, 42, Judy and I were at that spot in our sailboat to honor them and all those who were killed exactly 50 years later, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
We stopped our boat, we said a prayer, we tossed a shell lei into the water for all those who were down there. We stayed there about 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden, you know how these things go, you get a feeling, a sense. And the sense I got was, hey, thanks for coming, we appreciate that, but we're okay, and we don't need you here, so get on with your life. And for me, that was a way of my dad saying to me, okay, we've had our closure, get on with it. And I feel like that was our way to say thank you to the men who have served on this great ship. And I would say, of all the ships in the United States Navy, I don't know of one that can match the San Francisco's accomplishments. And so, on behalf of my dad, I would like to say thanks to all of you for making this ship the symbol of American strength and resolve, and may it ever be so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LeHardy. That was a very, very nice